It's recording. So our webinar today is the last in our series, and it's focused on grappling with varying success rates. So today, oh, I left my ad titles, although I added them today. We have Mallory Newell, Jerry Rosenberg, Ola Sabawi, and Karen Chow from Anza College. And we have Daniel Vernazza from Irvine Valley College. So we'll start with the Anza College folks and move on to Daniel from Irvine Valley. Just a few things to keep in mind as we have a big group today. So in the chat, make sure that you're using the chat to react to information in the presentation, request any clarification that you have, or ask any deep dive questions. We have tried to leave a little bit of time at the end for people to ask questions of each group of presenters. So we may pull some from the chat that we see. We also have multiple presenters, so we'll be able to kind of answer some questions as they come up. So thank you all so much for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to Mallory.
All right, thank you very much. Let me go ahead and get our slides started. All right, thank you. So when we were implementing AB 705 at Anza College, we started a little bit earlier than everyone else. And so we had a little bit more time to explore it early on. And what we found out when implementing is that we knew that access and enrollment increased exponentially in transfer level courses for all ethnic groups. And with increased access, we also saw our throughput rates double in both math and English. And for throughput, we define it as the percent of students starting in below transfer level or transfer level and successfully completing the transfer level gateway course in 1 year. So while we knew that our access and enrollment was increasing and our throughput rates were increasing, we still heard very valid faculty concerns around the success and equitable completion of the transfer level course when we no longer had as many basic skills and developmental courses. So this is where our research came in. So we wanted to validate and explore the concerns of our faculty members around student success and equitable distribution of success in transfer level courses when more students were having access to those courses. So in order to do that, we have the following research questions, which we will go over today with you. The first is, has broadened access to transfer level math and English lowered success rates? Have equity gaps worsened? How much do success rates vary across sections? What factors help predict successful completion of transfer level courses? And then we'll wrap it up with how this research can be leveraged to improve success rates. So now looking at our first research question, has broadened access to transfer level math and English lowered success rates? So we needed to take a historical view of our success rates. So we looked over the past 8 fall terms. And what you see here is that success rates have remained relatively unchanged. So for our ERIT 1A, which is our English 1A, success rates have really been stable around 80%, while our statistics class, the dark blue line on the bottom, has really been stable between 60 and 65% with a jump when we started implementing AB 705. So overall, to answer our first research question, success rates have really remained relatively unchanged pre and post AB 705 implementation in both transfer level English and math. So that enabled us to look at our second research question. Have equity gaps worsened? So again, we took a historical look, and we looked again at the last 8 years, pre and post AB 705. And what we see here is that equity gaps have not worsened, but they still remain. And so what we see here is what you will probably see at many of your colleges with Asian students and white students, orange and green, being at the top of the success range, and African American and Latinx students being at the bottom of the success range in the here black and pink. And so while the equity gaps have not worsened, they still remain. And this is for our English 1A. Now, if we look at our Gateway Statistics course, the transfer level statistics course, you can see here, same trend, that the equity gaps continue to persist, and they fit into the previous pattern that we've seen over the last 8 years, similar pre and post AB 705, again with Asian and white students being at the top of the success range and Latinx and African American students being at the bottom. So therefore, we were able to answer our second question, was that equity gaps haven't worsened, but they continue to persist. Now this leads us to our third research question. I'll turn it over to Jerry to go into detail on that one.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we've just seen that from 2012 to 2019, over 8 years, essentially the trends in success rates are very flat, almost perfectly flat for English. In math, it was up and down a little bit. In years when we were up by 3%, our annual program review, we extolled being human. We extolled our great results, and in the other years, de-emphasized them. But the important part here is that there was a total variation from year to year of a few percent and a very small long-term trend. The same thing for the next slide. One of the things that we did do is we said, well, if there's no changes that way, how else can we look at this? And so we took a look at, this is a graph of the completion for a single quarter, fall 2019, successful completion of our statistics course. When looked at from this point of view, each of these bars represents a different section of statistics. That quarter, we offered 48 sections. And what you see is, contrary to the small variations from year to year, in any single quarter, there was a variation from 29% to 100% in the success rates in individual sections of that same course. And then, Mallory? There. So that's a 71% variation depending on which section the student enrolled in. So let's say you were a student and you happen to, because of your schedule or your registration appointment, you registered for one of the sections 1 through 10. If you did, you had about a 42% chance of succeeding in that course. On the other hand, let's say your schedule, you happen to register for one of the other sections at the other end, one of the 10 sections, 39 through 48, you had a greater than 90% chance of succeeding in the course. So this is really a startling thing. Began to question this and ask around, what do you think the factors could be? And to a lot of people as well, it tells you that we know this about the math department. 1/2 the math department are ogres. But we then looked at some other departments, and this was surprising to us. For the English 1A, the same sort of range occurred. It went from 32% to 100% success rates in the 109 sections that were offered that quarter. And when we looked further to some other departments, so there's a 68% difference depending on which section a student registered for. And for other departments, for example, political science, the same sort of thing appeared. And when I talked to some other deans at other colleges, they said that when they looked at their data, they started seeing the same sorts of things. Okay, so here you see there's a 52% range in that. So finally, the question really is, what's going on here? Is it the time of day? Is it the mode? Is it because the class is offered online or face-to-face? Is it because they're part-timers in some sections and full-timers in the others? The years of experience. So that led us to the real research question is, what are these factors that are most important? Thank you.
Now we'll turn it over to Ola to answer question 4.
Thanks, Mallory. So we wanted to look at all the variables that we can think of that will help us predict student success completion of the transfer level statistics course. So I'm gonna skip next. Okay, so one of the questions we investigated, we wanted to see if there's any difference in grading between full-time faculty and part-time faculty. So we compared the success rates of the students of the part-time faculty and the students of the full-time faculty over a 5-year period. So we had a huge data set that was in a whole 5-year period range. We plotted the median success rate and the quartile success range for each group in this box and whisker plot. The box on the right shows the success statistics for the part-time faculty, and the one on the left shows the statistics for the full-time faculty. As you can see here, the success rates for the two groups really overlapped substantially. So both groups had similar range, kind of like similar highs and similar lows of success rates. And from what you can see here, the part-time faculty did have a slightly higher median success rate, but the difference was inconsequential given that, you know, there's a huge overlap between the two groups. The small gap between the two median lines represent a 6% difference. So our conclusion was that part-time faculty are not really contributing to the grade inflation, and at least not in any significant or obvious way. Another question that we investigated, is there a relationship or a correlation between the number of courses that an instructor had taught the statistics course over that 5-year period and their course success rate? So for their students, obviously. So we made a scatter plot, and as you can see, it shows no pattern. So with more years of experience and more courses taught, we did not really see any consistent or predictable increase in student success rate. We calculated the statistical correlation, and it was very, very small and very weak. In a correlation graph, a straight horizontal line like the blue line that you see there, that usually indicates no relationship between the two variables or a near zero relationship. So our conclusion to, based on this finding is that more experience on the instructor side doesn't really contribute to a higher success rate for their students. So in order to understand better the type of variables that affect student success and the degree to which all those variables actually contribute to student success, we set out to build a statistical generalized linear model that predicted student success in statistics courses. So because we wanted to consider every possible predictor of student success, we included 34 variables in our model. All of which are listed right there. I'm not gonna name every single one of them. So after multiple analyses, we were able to determine that there were 5 variables out of the initial 34 variables that significantly contributed to student success in statistics classes. And in no particular order, those variables were student ethnicity, the high school GPA of the student, whether or not the student was enrolled in a Math Performance Success Learning Community, or MPS, and the modality of the course. So whether the course was offered online or face-to-face, that really mattered, and the instructor that taught the course. So from our prediction model, which included those 5 variables that I just mentioned, we wanted to know what was the variable that was most predictive of student success out of all the variables in the, that were found significant. And we found that the instructor variable was actually the most predictive of student success out of all the variables, which were, again, high school GPA, ethnicity, enrollment in learning community, and course modality, and high school GPA. All right. So this graph or this plot shows the odds of success in a statistics course by each level of the 5 variables that we found were significant in predicting success. So on this plot, the horizontal x-axis on the bottom there, that's the scale that we used for the odds of success. So the blue data points on the right side of the line, of the red line there in the middle, those points indicate higher odds of success. And the left side of the red line, those little red data points on the bottom there, that indicates lower odds of success. And the red line right in the middle is the no effect line, meaning if a data point falls on that red line, the odds are neither positive nor negative. So there's like no effect. The vertical y-axis lists each level of the variables that contributed to student success, ordered by the highest odds of success on the very top to the lowest odds of success on the bottom. So by looking at this plot, the first thing that jumps out is that the highest odds of success are all attributed to the instructor variable. In fact, starting from the top, the graph lists 56 individual instructors as the contributors to the highest odds of success before any other variable is listed. I believe the 57th ranked variable is a high school GPA. Yeah. So the second thing that jumps out when you look at this graph here is the big variation in the odds of success between the instructors. And that's something that I'll explain a little bit more in the next slide. Okay, so here we zoomed in on the top segment of the graph to better explain this variation in student odds of success. So the top of the list here, we see instructor 16. And so this prediction model basically says that when you control every other variable in this model, except for the instructor variable, meaning, so when you hold ethnicity, high school GPA, course modality, and NPS enrollment all the same across all students, but only change the instructor, then the student in instructor 16's courses have gained 22 times likely higher success rate to pass than not have had instructor 16 teaching the class. And then down on a little bit lower, we see instructor 27 class, instructor 27. So students in instructor 27 here, it shows that they have a 7.2 times, they're 7.2 times more likely to pass the class than not having had instructor 27 teaching the course. So for example, so just to kind of put this into context, say you have two students that are already positioned to be very successful in a statistics course. So based on this model, that would be two students of Asian descent, both of them with a very high school GPA background, and both of them enrolled in a face-to-face class, and they are both enrolled with NPS. And one of them enrolls in instructor 16th course, and the other enrolls in instructor 27 course. The one that has a higher chance of succeeding in statistics will be the one in instructor 16th course versus the one in instructor 27 course. So this seems kind of like a big difference in the odds of student success between two instructors, giving the same student. But this is only a small segment of the graph. So if you remember, when you consider all the instructors in the model, you'll see that this variation is actually a lot bigger. Thank you.
So now we wanted to say, now, so that we did a literature search for to support our research. And while there is not much research in higher education in the community college system around the variance in success and faculty variability, but there is a ton of research in K-12 around this work. And so we just wanted to highlight two studies in particular and link to some other resources for you to explore on your own around what the K-12 scholarly research says about this. So in a study from 1997 by Wright, Horn, and Sanders, they found that ethnicity, socioeconomic level, class size, and classroom heterogeneity are poor predictors of student academic growth. Rather, based on these studies, the effectiveness of the teacher is the major determinant of students' academic progress. And then further in 2003, Mijas and Reynolds found that when controlling for prior student achievement, the effect of teacher behavior is the most significant factor in explaining student progress, explaining 5.6% of the total variance and more than half of the between classroom variance in student progress over 2 years. If you find these articles to be interesting, there's a book here that has a ton of interesting articles all compiled into one called Effective Teachers and Student Achievement. Now we're going to pass it over to our colleague, Karen Chow, who is our Academic Senate President and a faculty member in the English department. And she's going to address question 5 on how can this research be leveraged to improve success rates.
Thank you, Mallory. And so I uploaded my Zoom and then I listed my computer, so my phone. So I just want to check to see if my audio is okay. First of all, can you all hear me?
Now we can. You're coming in and out a little bit now, but now we can.
Okay, let me see if I can try to improve that. First of all, let me see. I'm going to put my phone on speaker mode.
That's way better, Karen.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Then I also want to do a time check. Do I still have about 10 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So yeah, thank you, Mallory and Ola and Jerry for talking about some of the findings that you have from this extensive data that you've been pulling and running different studies with the data. And I guess really I'm here to try to explain, like from a faculty perspective, how we are able to use the data individually and in our discussions with our colleagues, right? To sort of get at, because we know that numbers can tell us a lot, but we also know that direct discussion with faculty, having them describe exactly what's happening in their classrooms, right? So sort of that qualitative data is also very important. But first, I think Mallory will show us the screen that will allow me to share how, for example, even individual instructors now at Anza can go into their own data and look at the student success rates across ethnicity, gender, and those kinds of variables, and how you can see how we can now see as instructors just those variables even within a section or across different sections. So of course, that's now a powerful tool for us as faculty to be able to look at our own data for our courses in that way. And then the next slide, I think, will show that here is also, across a single instructor within a term, that even within a term, same level course, different sections, right? You could see a lot of variability even within the same instructor. And so you can see, you can take a look at that and you can take more time with that. But what I want to also get into is the next slide, where I think it's really good for us as faculty to start to develop reflective questions. And I think this might be, okay, well, there's a version, and I welcome people to email me, because I think I was trying to update this presentation to show that I have a lot of sub questions for these overall questions. Oh, are they in there?
Yeah, they're after this slide.
Oh, cool. Okay, great. So these are sort of the larger, more overall questions that I think that we can get at that can help us get to some helpful qualitative data for us as instructors. So let me just run through them really quick. So what are strategies that are used by instructors who are showing good success rates? And I see that there's already been a lot of questions about that in today's chat. And so let's go into that question, right? Let's look at our own data. Let's look at our own practices. Let's try to talk to our colleagues and see what's going on there. Because also what's also interesting too, right? That would be interesting to look at is, I know talking to my scheduler, we also have faculty who have different practices in terms of, for example, when they add students, some instructors add many more students above their cap Others stay very close to their cap. And if an instructor is adding a lot of students over their cap and still showing high success rates, that would be really interesting, right? To explore what's going on there. Secondly, so do we have clear student learning outcomes and a consensus of successful demonstration of student learning outcomes for the courses? So, let's all try to get on the same page about what those learning outcomes are and what is a successful demonstration of those outcomes. Also, are we as faculty individually and together reflecting on the success rates and what is that, trying to dig deeper into that. And then are we reflecting with our colleagues and sharing strategies? And then finally, I think a really important thing for us to look at is we definitely still have students who are not succeeding, and we really need to dig deeper into that, right? Like what's going to help, we don't want to leave anybody behind, right? So what's going to try to help move the success of those students? So next slide. Okay, so further questions for the faculty reflection. So are any of the successful strategies for the high student success incorporating collaboration with student support services or other services or faculty or counselors? Is there compensation or professional development credit given to share these successful strategies via workshops, video presentation, and also how do our institutions help to amplify and encourage successful teaching and classroom strategies? Next slide. Okay. Our departments discussing the learning outcomes and what those outcomes look like in the course. What are examples or evidence or demonstration of the student learning outcomes that can be shared? So for instance, in our department, English department, we're talking about portfolios and sort of like using a portfolio process where we share our students' work and try to come to a consensus around what constitutes quote unquote success. And then are there discussions around grading and how department colleagues grade similar types of assignments? And then is there support for part-time faculty around curriculum development and student learning outcomes assessment work? Next slide. And then this kind of digs into questions for faculty self-reflection. What am I personally doing or not doing for students? What could I have done or not done to better understand a student's issues and or build support for students? Did I utilize student service interventions and or build a class community, right? And I think especially asking ourselves that, especially during a quarter at the end of a term or at the end of a term would be good for us to do that as a regular practice. Okay, next slide. And further reflections, which are reflections that we could do hopefully with colleagues together, is how do students perceive themselves in the curriculum and the classroom environment? How do they feel within the classroom community and how do they learn that content? What kinds of assumptions are we making about what would engage students and help them feel welcome and safe to learn? So for example, is it enough to simply include a Latinx or a Black writer into a course reading or content? So beyond the syllabus, right? Can we also benefit from sharing strategies of how we introduce, present, and discuss this content? And I think that's my last slide. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We are going to turn it over to Daniel Vernazza from my college, Irvine Valley, to share some of the things that we have been doing in our department to sort of think about these issues that Deanza highlighted. Daniel?
So yes, we have sort of seen very similar things as they have at Anza College. And I'll go through some of the data just to sort of give you a sense of what has happened since AB 705. So back in 2015, we had a 38% throughput rate for first-time students starting Writing 1. After AB 705 in 2019, 99% were going into transfer level composition. whereas before it was only 38%. So we are getting more students in the courses that they need to be in. And then in spring 2020, we eliminated all below transfer level composition courses. But similarly, we see that the gaps still remain. So this is from 2015, 2016. We've gotten better completion rates, but we still have equity gaps, as you can see here. And so our question, of course, is why are we seeing these equity gaps? And not only do we have equity gaps, as sort of we saw in the De Anza presentation as well, we have wildly different success rates in our Writing 1 courses. And this is from fall 2019. So we see here we have passing rates at 96%, all the way down to 24, 29%. And even if we were to eliminate those lower scores, we still see quite a large range, 50% between 90%. Sort of building on the idea from De Anza that instructors really matter and influence potential success. And what was interesting, we didn't just see this in our regular Writing 1 course, we also have a writing course with support. And we see the same type of variation here with over 96% success rate versus 39. There's not as many courses, but we're still seeing the same type of variation. So our concerns is sort of similar what was brought up by Dr. Chow is what was happening in our Writing 1 classes. While we have improved throughput, we do have equity gaps. And we also know, like De Anza figured out, that instructor often determines a student's odds of success. And even that anecdotally, we hear and see a large variance in students' experiences within the classroom. So we know there's issues and sort of what can we do? So we thought it would be good to look at instructor standards, policies, and assignments across WR1 sections, because a lot of let me step back for a minute. Almost all English faculty also work in the Writing Center. In the Writing Center, we can talk to students who are in different courses and learn about their experiences in different sections. And that's where we really start to see or notice a lot of variance between sections. So we thought, looking at standards, policies, and assignments, maybe we can learn something that's going on. And possibly, could the variance in grades be influenced by these standards, policies, and assignments? And how widely varied is the student experience in Writing 1? So these were kind of our questions as we were going to look at instructor standards, policies, and assignments. Just sort of some context, we have a little bit less sections than De Anza. We had 65 Writing 1 sections in fall, 41. The breakdown by faculty, you can see full-time and associate faculty. I think this would be fairly standard as you would find at most colleges. So the first thing that we did is we collected all the syllabi from all the Writing 1 sections. And then we looked at that and tried to sort of see if there was anything noticeable. And what we realized by looking at syllabi is we really needed a lot more information. Within the syllabi, there's not always the level of information that helps you understand what's going on. So the next thing we did, we created 2 surveys. These were anonymous surveys for all the faculty, one for syllabi and one for assignments. And initially, our major concerns included the reading requirements, the paper lengths, and grading policies. But we also started to look at some other things as well. And the inquiry was given out through Google Forms. And we emphasized that it was anonymous. And the goal here was to encourage faculty participation, right? Not be punitive in any way. So everyone would participate. And these are a type of question that was asked. This was about reading. We had some other questions about grading policies, but basically it was just a way for us to better understand how individual instructors were reaching or achieving the goals of the course, so what was written in the COR. One thing I did want to point out before we get into the results is we had a participation rate of 68% of Writing 1 sections were represented. So we were able to gather what I would consider to be some good data. All right, so this is what we found in the syllabi. Here's where we start to see some pretty interesting things. So for our English class, the 4 major papers, the way our course is set up, it's based around 4 major papers. And we can see here that there's a wide variety in how much the papers are worth as a percentage of a student's overall grade. We have here down 35% all the way up to 85%. And the lighter blue is from fall and the spring is 2000, and the darker blue is from spring. And while they're not necessarily comparable, it does sort of show some interesting things. But the main thing we took away is, wow, there's a big variation here. How can we kind of come to more of an agreement about what the paper should be equal to as a percentage of the student's overall grade? One thing that we discovered and we looked at this year or this semester was late policies. And I don't remember why exactly we looked at it. I think maybe it came up in some sort of department discussion. And we see here that the late policies were radically different. We have, 5 of the syllabi we saw, no work accepted after the deadline. 8 work accepted after the deadline, but only with substantial penalty. And that would be, like 1 lower grade for every 24 hours that it's missed. Then we had, some other ones with actually no articulated late policies. We also had the nebulous flexible policy. And that, of course, can be problematic because you have equity issues and, different students don't know exactly what that means. The one thing to notice is late policies vary tremendously. And of course, as we know from research, this can really impact disproportionately impacted populations more than other students. Another thing we found when we looked at assignments is the number of pages written. And so when we had the assignment survey, we weren't as able to get as much participation as we were in the syllabi survey. But once again, we're seeing quite the range of variation. We're having in certain classes, students have to only turn in 18 pages of work versus students having to turn in upwards of 28 pages. Quite a significant difference. And although we see most kind of in the 20 to 22 range, where it's probably where our department would like it to be, we still see some variation as well. So what are our next steps? Kind of after looking at that, we realized, somehow we need to better articulate what our desires as a department are for Writing 1. And so we've created a best practices work group. And in this work group, we're examining what we think the reading load should be for a Writing 1 class, what should be the writing load, what would be sort of best course policies and course expectations. Also, we're looking at grading. That's probably going to take place a little bit later, not quite there. But our goal is to sort of come up with departmental best practices and then try to create a set of recommendations that successfully negotiates the spectrum between rigor and flexibility. And of course, we want to continue to gather more data and sort of see if we're going to see, as we've only been talking about this for about a year now, and see if we're going to get more consistency across the sections. So ultimately, what we found out so far is this method has been particularly good because it's not punitive. We're not singling any instructor out and saying you're doing a bad job or, this is not right. So it's much more collaborative. It's helped us to discover new lines of inquiry. Like we never would have started looking at late policies as an issue before actually examining people's syllabi. It's a soft way to reinforce departmental standards by having everyone having to complete a syllabi check, if you will, semester to semester, just sort of reminds those who are teaching Writing 1 what is important to our department. Because it was anonymous and we have a lot of people working on it, it's helped create department buy-in. We haven't had any contentious conversations about Writing 1. And it's helping us to get a better understanding of what students are experiencing in their writing class or classroom when it comes to workload and reading load. And hopefully, we're not at that point yet. It'll help us to better address existing equity gaps in our writing classes, and we can sort of better understand what is happening and what the best practices are. And that's all I have.
Daniel, there's a few questions in the chat for you. One asks, will you use data from course success rates to determine the best practices? So best practices equal the ones that produce higher success rates, the ones used by faculty with higher success. So how do the success rates play into creating the best practices?
Well, what's interesting is with this graph, we have been given this data by research, but we don't know who any of these instructors are. And so we as a department, we haven't quite gotten to that point where we're going to look at it sort of instructor by instructor. So to answer the question, no, we don't know right now who's has the 96%, the 92%, and we don't know exactly what they're doing.
And then there was a question about academic freedom. Does anyone feel like this is an infringement on their academic freedom, sharing these kind of common best practices across sections?
I don't think that will be an issue, because they're at this point they're only suggested best practices, right? And so there's no limitation as to what faculty can or can't do. And also, we're not really, with regards to say the content of the course, we haven't come up with any, and we don't plan to come up with any limitations of what the content of the course could be. This would just be the number of pages written or the number of pages read. And once again, they're just kind of suggestions as to what we as a department think is best for our students. But we haven't really, I think most of the discussions about academic freedom often come with content, but it may happen that we get sort of pushback on setting or suggesting requirements for page length and reading length as well. But right as of yet, we have not gotten that pushback.
I'll say, as a member of this department, the way that Daniel and our colleague Jeff Johnson approached this was very, they just kind of laid out the data and it started a conversation. It was great because they just kind of, we got these same slides that you are seeing here with more information as well. We just picked some highlights here, but it just was to start a conversation. It wasn't coming in and saying, this is what we found and we all need to change. It was like, this is what we found. What do we think? What do we need to do? And so we're really just starting that process of thinking about, we see this variation, now what? And so we formed a work group to kind of dig into that. So we're not at the point where we've said, and I don't think, as Daniel said, we'll get there, you must do this, right? It's just investigating. We notice this, now what, right? Okay, let's see some questions here. One question, do you hear the high success equals low standards in your department? Is this investigation into assignments, grading, late policies helping address that concern?
I think so. There is always a concern about rigor and what that means. And I think that conversation is changing as well, what it means to be rigorous. And I do think this, once again, this allows us as a department to talk about these issues and once again, I would use this word, a non-confrontational way, really allowing us to sort of discuss what we think about these issues and not, how would I say it? Not forcefully advocating for certain positions as of yet.
And Daniel, do you think this could be applicable in other disciplines to do a similar, I see some questions about following up on how this would be applicable for math, say?
I think it's applicable to any department in which syllabi are not standardized, right? And the grade breakdown is not, I know some departments have breakdown that's standardized and people are almost teaching the exact same class, but when in a class where, pardon me, in a class where that's not happening, this could certainly be applicable.
So there's a concern raised that the department would agree on certain standards that won't be the standards that actually yield higher and more equitable success rates. So how do you think you can work toward that, making sure that, I guess the question is, if you're suggesting best practices, how will you know that these are best practices?
Well, there's two different things. There's best practices, and there's sort of departmental expectations, and I think those can be at conflict a lot of the times. What sort of the department wants a course to be like, and what best practices actually say a course should be like, and I think that is sort of a process of negotiation at this point in time, and it's sort of putting in the effort to try to get the department to sort of buy into this idea that there are these best practices that do not necessarily diminish rigor in any way or diminish student learning. And I think it's, as Summer said, this is sort of just the start of the process.
So if anyone has any other questions, you can feel free to raise your hand or put them into the chat. And we can ask the De Anza folks questions as well. You have those. Julie, I think that would be a question for De Anza. Did you control for student demographics and enrollment status, part-time, full-time enrollment? There's tremendous variation in student demographics among sections. Do you want to speak about how you controlled for that?
Yeah, I'm trying to find my slide with all of our variables that we controlled for. Ola, do you have it on top of your head?
No, not off the top of my head. No.
There is a question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I have it. So for student variables, we controlled for ethnicity, high school GPA, age, gender, low income status, first generation status, EOPS enrollment, DSPS enrollment, veterans enrollment, foster youth enrollment, CalWORKs enrollment, student type meaning first time, returning, transfer, and their educational goal.
Daniel, did you want to add something? Did you see a question there?
There was a question about embedded tutors and if that has had an impact. And from what I've heard, I haven't seen the research yet, but from what I heard, that we do have research that suggests having embedded tutors in classes is increasing the success rate. But as I said, I have yet to see that data. We started the embedded tutor program probably about a year ago.
Dan Staylor, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I do. This is really great information. I want to thank folks for presenting what it is that they're presenting. One of the things that sticks out to me is that we're seeing discussion about a range of different policies, a range of different ways of approaching coursework and ways of approaching, the standards or basically like the student learning outcomes for each course. And I'm wondering if folks might be able to speak about tying their work with student learning outcomes to the writing program administrator's outcomes statement on what outcomes we're all supposed to be meeting for freshman composition or first year composition. Has any college gone about doing that?
I can add to that a little bit. So today at Anza College, we had our student learning outcomes convocation, and it was really a 2-hour conversation around a new way that we are doing student learning outcomes. And this year we took kind of a break from our program review, and we took this year to reflect on our own success rates at the program support program, instructional program, and individual instructor level. And so we use the data that Karen showed you, how instructors can see their own instructor level data. And we ask them to use that data and have conversations within their department and reflect on some research questions or some reflection questions. And that was what program review was for the whole year, really trying to have space and time dedicated to departments and faculty having these in-depth conversations around the factors that students bring to class with them, the factors that instructors bring to class with them, racial bias, stereotype threat, and then how we as an institution can come together and support all students and help them be successful, how we address this variation. So there was really a whole year of focusing on this type of research that was our replacement for program review. And we've also been shifting from student learning outcomes that are more course embedded to student learning outcomes that are more holistic. We're calling them meaningful assessments. So how does the student feel at the end of your class? Do they feel like they developed a sense of community in addition to learning, writing a 18 to 28 page paper, right? So there's a difference there, right? Do they feel like they saw themselves reflected in the curriculum? Do they feel like they have the capacity now to be, like say, for example, in a political science lab, do they have the capacity to be an engaged citizen? So kind of really rethinking how our student learning outcomes are constructed and how that leads to a better sense of belonging for our students that we hope will lead to greater retention for our students. So we've really been trying to shift our thinking around this because we have acknowledged as a campus that the way we've been doing things for at least the last 10 years hasn't shifted our outcomes. And so we're really trying to look at it from a different angle. So I hope that answers your question.
Maybe if I could just ask a follow-up question, like what work is being done to tie student learning outcomes that we're seeing at our different colleges to the national standards set forth by the WPA?
I think that question's beyond my pay scale, so I'll turn it over to anyone else that can answer it.
It sounds like there are no takers on that one. I'm wondering if we could shift the topic to, I really appreciated Daniel talking through how thoughtfully and they approach this so as not to trigger big defensiveness and kind of battles between faculty. I think that was really lovely. And then I think that that's sort of in also intention though around like, but our, what are the practices that produce better outcomes is sort of being, is kind of not quite being directly engaged there. And so, sorry, I have work being done in my house. If Mallory, I'm wondering from your research, if you could answer that question of like, is there a way to surface practices from the faculty who do have higher success rates? And maybe if you wanted to add a layer to that, like if there was some kind of meaningful SLO assessment or success in the next class that would, sort of help assuage any worries that these practices were actually a reduction in rigor or standards. I'm just wondering if we can get a better handle on the research into this without, touching the third rail of causing a department conflagration.
Jerry, were you going to say something?
No, I'm just, that is a very difficult, I was going to say that is a truly difficult question. Just my general feeling is that to get started, the first thing is just to start the process, gathering the data on particular factors, especially when we're talking about things like assignment and late policy and things like that. I don't think we're quite there yet. My desire is to just see faculty start to talk to each other and begin to identify amongst themselves some of those factors. And then once that happens, I think that there'll be a later follow-up. Okay, now they're saying here's some factors. Let's take a look at that and we can make some measurements.
I would just
agree.
offer, oh, sorry. Yeah,
No, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Amber from, well, used to be Las Positas, and now I'm with San Jose Evergreen Community College District. I would say that what I love about these presentations, and I think is vital, is that partnership between researchers and faculty, right? That's the key, and that trust building, and that having a faculty champion this, or a couple get in cahoots with each other and sort of begin to prioritize these discussions. That we can provide all the data you want. Without willing participants, it'll never make it in. So our ability to relate with faculty and build relationships there is absolutely key. And I applaud the presenters for having done that.
I would say, Katie, part of me agrees with you. There is this desire, well, let's just publish everyone's names with the courses and just see what happens. And, because, this process will take a long time. And while this process takes time, the same thing with AB 705, students are being punished, right? And they're not getting what they need. And it's hard to want that change and know that there's better practices out there that can be done, but not being able to do it just because, to avoid the complete department breakdown, if you will, or even, the realization, what if that was published and you found out like you were one of the bad, I don't want to say bad ones, but one of the, that you were struggling when it came to rate. That's a very hard thing for people to deal with and address. But I do agree with you. It's hard to do both, to have that sense of urgency and at the same time build consensus and talk to everyone at the same time.
Katie or Myra, did you want to add anything before we wrap up?
Myra, you want to go?
I would just say that I really appreciated this presentation today, and I think it is the beginning of a conversation about how we need to better support our students, and that starting to look at artifacts from the classroom is a great first step, right? What kind of assignments are you giving? How many? How are you determining your grade? And I think it's a first step, but it's a really important one, and it begins to address, or at least start a conversation around this terrible thing we always hear. And I don't hear it in any other job in the world, that if you're doing well, you're doing well by students. A lot of them are succeeding, that somehow you are therefore bad. That is just a shocking thing. And so I think that this is a great way to begin a conversation that will lead us forward on that.
I really agree with that. Thank you, Myra. And I would just add that I think that this kind of work is critical to the what the Center for Urban Education has urged institutions to do around being an equity-minded institution, is to really stop placing the blame for poor outcomes on the students themselves and take ownership of our role in creating those outcomes. And I think, drilling down into the instructor level and the roles that the instructor is playing, and high success rates or low success rates is a really critical equity move, and essential for us to sort of take responsibility and then figure out how to improve our outcomes.
Thank you, Katie. Yeah, I just want to add that, I'm on the work group with Daniel, kind of looking at the practices across sections. And I think you'll agree, Daniel, it was so refreshing. Not one person in that meeting said, it's the students. The students are the problem. It was all a discussion of what can we do to make it better. And that just was the default attitude. And I think, you know, as Katie said, that's the approach that has to happen, right? What can we do to make this better? So thank you all so much for being here on this Friday afternoon. I saw a few questions and we did record this. It will be on the CAP publications page, and I will send a link to all of you later this afternoon. If you just go on our website, it's on the publications page. We should get it up sometime early next week. The slides and materials will be there as well. We'll also send a follow-up survey for your feedback. So thank you all, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend.
Woo!
Thanks.